Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah Daf Tet Zion. This week's learning is sponsored by Sarah Galasco in memory of Lucy, Maya, and Rena D. Sending love and strength at this tough time to Leo, Karen, Tali, and Yehuda, Richard, Ben, Gabrielle, and Stephanie. Today's daf is sponsored by Suzanne Minton in honor of Dr. Erin Arnold. Mazel tov to my wonderful chavruta on our first year of learning daf Yomi together. Thank you for your support and wonderful insights. Today's daf is sponsored by Becky Baumel in honor of her mother, Judy Schwartz. She finds every opportunity to do chesed and inspires everyone around her. Okay, we're going to get started from the bottom of Tet Vav Amud Bet. Today's main topic is the afar. Okay, it's a very hard word to translate, afar, and it's going to be part of our question today is, what exactly is this afar? What could be considered in addition to afar? Afar literally really usually means dust. Okay, the Hebrew word for dust is actually avak, which is not exactly afar, but it also seems to connote here soil, earth. Okay, we can use a whole bunch of different words to explain what this is, but you're going to see the struggles of the Gemara as to what could this word afar possibly include, what exactly we're talking about. We started with this, the way we really understood it originally was that it means earth or soil, something taken from the ground. And that comes from the fact that the pasuk says we take it from karka mishkan. And according to the Mishnah, there was this ring on this tile on the ground in the middle of the Mishkan that they would pick up, right, in the temple also. They would pick it up, and underneath it, they would take the soil from there, or whatever was in the ground. But we saw in this braita that it needed to be soft. And then what we saw from the first braita, and we're going to see difference of opinion here, is that because the pasuk says, okay, we'll read the words exactly, min ha'afar asher yeh bekarka mishkan. You have to take it from the afar, again, this word afar, soil, earth, however we call it, that is found, it sounds like, right? Asher yeh, that is in the ground of the Mishkan. You have to remember all their floors, right? They didn't have tiled floors in general, right? There was always everything underneath, just like now, even if you have tiles right underneath, there's sort of, again, it's not necessarily there. It was probably soil, but again, it's unclear exactly what it is. So the first braita had said, you might think we bring soil from outside, but it says bekarka mishkan, which sounds like it has to be inside. But then what if it's inside and it's hard? You might need to kind of take a spade and start breaking it up into pieces. It says asher yeh, if it's there, meaning as it is in its form. So now we had this struggle because the assumption is you need it to be soft because you're not going to put clods of big chunks of earth into the water. It needs to dissolve. It needs to be soft. So in the end, the Braita had said, if it's soft, the one you have in the floor of the Mishkan, great, use that. If not, bring it from outside, right? And that was what we said. And then put it there, and from there, take it. But now we're going to have a different Braita, 3 lines from the bottom of Tet Vav Amud Bet. Umin ha'afar asher yihiyeh, melamed shayam etakeh mibachutz umachnis. So from the afar that's there, from there they learn, meaning it has to be afar that's ready to go. So they say, from there you learn, you get it ready outside the temple, and as you find appropriate kind of consistency that you want outside, or break it up outside, and then you bring it inside. Because asher yihiyeh means it has to be ready. So if that's the case, bring it from outside, the opposite of what we just said. By the way, it's a study guide today, which will help you kind of chart things out. Bekarka mishkan. So then what do we do with the words bekarka mishkan? Well, we're going to have 2 different alternative explanations of what karka mishkan is doing. One is taking this very much out of context. And that's Isi ben Yehuda. We're going to have 2 Isis, so as not to confuse them. Isi ben Yehuda says, Lahavi karka shilo no v'giv'onu beit olami. So he says, this comes to include that not only right from here, but it means, and really what's taken out of context is it seems, again, the way many of the commentaries understand this line is, and what you're going to see from the next line is the reaction to this, which seems to indicate this is what it really means, is that this whole ceremony, the Sotah ceremony, doesn't only take place in the tabernacle, the Mishkan that existed in the time of the desert, but even in Shiloh, Novin Giv'on, where the Mishkan moved to later, and Beit Olamim and the Beit HaMikdash, the Sotah ceremony was done there as well. Say it's taken out of context. So this pasuk is all about the ground, right? And the soil where you're getting it from. But they say, no. The soil comes from outside. But Bekarka Mishkan says, bring the soil into wherever, whether you're in the temple, whether you're in the Mishkan, whether you're in the Mishkan that was in the desert, whether you're in the Mishkan that was in Shiloh, no, Givon, wherever you are, this, right, whatever you call temple or tabernacle, functions for the Sotah. Now, the reaction to this is, what are you talking about? Of course, anytime we talk about the Mishkan, it means, right? And it's a reference to wherever the Mishkan is, not just in the desert, and it's a reference to the temple. And Yissi ben Menachem is going to word this a little bit differently, but Yissi ben Menachem says, oh, and by the way, what does he say? Karka Mishkan is unnecessary. If it's unnecessary, Yissi ben Yehuda says, it must be coming to teach you any ground of Mishkan, whether it's Mishkan, whether it's a different Mishkan, whether it's the Beit HaMikdash. Yissi ben Menachem omer, you don't need a drasha to tell us that the Sotah ceremony can be done even if you're not in the Mishkan, the tabernacle that was specifically in the desert. And he says it's just very logical. You can't, now, if you're impure, you're not allowed to go into the temple. Okay, even a light impurity. If you're impure and you go into the temple, you get curried. So now, it says in the Torah, right, if you come into the Mishkan, but obviously it's true for the Mishkan, it's true for the Beit HaMikdash, it's true for wherever the Mishkan wandered. Of course, that's obvious. So if when Tuma Kala lo chileka katuv, and the Torah basically said Mishkan and it meant all the others, and nobody disagrees with that, all the more so if you're talking about the Tuma of something much more serious. Okay, now this isn't exactly Tuma, but we know in the Sotah Psukim it talks about her as if she's nitme'ah. It's using a borrowed phrase. Doesn't mean impurity of the impurity to a dead body or something, or impurity to a sheretz, a creature. But the desecration, right? Using Tuma as a word of desecration, the desecration of a married woman, all the more so it should be allowed to be done if it can be done in the Mishkan, it's of course going to be done in the temple. So therefore, don't tell me that this drasha Karka Mishkan is coming to tell you this can also be done in the temple. That is so obvious you don't need a drasha for it. In kem matam lomar bekarka hamishkan. So what is bekarka hamishkan coming to teach you? Shelo yavi mitoch kupato. So he has a different explanation of karka mishkan. Assuming like this Braita assumes, which is, he doesn't disagree with the basic halacha. According to him, again, what we saw in the previous class was you have to take karka from the Mishkan. Only if you don't have, you bring it from outside. This drasha says, no. You bring it from the outside, ready to go, right? It's soft, it's ready. That's what you bring to the Mishkan. But what is karka Mishkan coming to teach you? The first Yissi ben Yehuda says is coming to teach you that this ceremony can also be done in the temple. According to Yissi ben Menachem, it's coming to teach you that you can't bring it. Okay, now, how are you going to bring soil? You're going to bring it in a box or a basket or some type of implement. Well, when you bring it from outside, you can't just bring it straight in your basket and put it in the water, which is what we're going to do with this, right? This soil. But you have to first put it on the karka mishkan, right? Put it down on the ground, let it come in contact with the ground of the mishkan, then you can put it in. You don't bring it straight from your basket into the water. That's what it's coming to teach you. So we now have three different explanations of karka mishkan. Either it means the soil actually has to come from the karka mishkan in the ideal circumstances. Only if you can't, then you bring it from outside and put it down on the ground and then bring it in, put it in the water. Or it means something totally, entirely different, which is just coming to teach you that this ceremony can be done also in the temple or in any other mishkan besides the one in the desert. Or it's coming to teach you kind of like the first one, but not that it has to come from the ground in the mishkan, but it can come from outside. But if you're bringing it in some sort of utensil, put it first on the ground of the mishkan when you come into the mishkan, and then you put it in the water. Now the Gemara is going to ask a question, which is going to take us an entire amud, entire side of a daf, to explain, to try to get to an answer to this question. In the end, we're kind of left a little bit hanging. What if you don't have soil? Can you put ashes? Ashes, again, this goes back to what exactly is afar. And we're going to see later that even the Torah sometimes interchanges afar and efer. Now, in the Hebrew language, they're very similar. In English, they're very different. But in the Hebrew language, afar and efer are just a difference of an ayin and an aleph. Now you might remember we had sugyot where there's a whole question: is this with an aleph, with an ayin, right? Which with these words written with an aleph or an ayin, and often these could get confused. So they say, if there's no afal, can you use efer? So again, afal, like I said, no, afar could be dust. Dust and ashes maybe are a little similar. Still, they're very different. But the question here is, can ashes be used? Now, why is this connected? First of all, we're going to compare later the efer of the para aduma, the ashes of the para aduma, which also go into water, and the afar, the soil, or again, always a little bit of a difficulty of how exactly to define this, of the sotah. So the question is, can you put ashes instead? So now they make reference, okay, besides connecting to the para aduma, which we'll get to later, which is specifically ashes, we're going to talk about a different halacha. When you slaughter an animal, you are supposed to cover okay, I'll read you the pasuk. I put it on the sheet also. It's in the second chart on the page. Vayikra Yud Zayin pasuk Gimel. Ish mibnei Israel u'minager agar b'tucham asher yatzud seid chaya. Okay, so a person who, a Jewish person or a convert who captures an animal, slaughters it, asher yachel, v'shafach et damo, you have to spill the blood, v'chisau ba'afar, and you cover the blood with what word? Afar. Okay, so now the Gemara says, there's a machloket there before I even get to it inside. There's a machloket there between Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel about whether when you cover it, it has to be covered with this afal, let's say soil, earth, or can it be covered with ashes? So Beit Shammai says you can't use ashes. It says afar, it means afal. But Beit Hillel says you can use ashes as well. So the Gemara wants to know really, can we compare and say it's the same machloket here as well? So they say, Aliba de Beit Shammai lo tibailach. Our question of, if you don't have afar, can you use efer? If you don't have the soil, can you use ashes? According to Beit Shammai lo tibailach, it's not a question according to Beit Shammai, for sure not. Because lo matzinu efer shekaroi afar. According to Beit Shammai, never in the Torah do they use the word afar to mean efer. Those are two totally different words. Ki tibailach aliba de Beit Hillel. But our question is according to Beit Hillel. So, since Beit Hillel thinks that when it comes to covering the blood of a slaughtered animal, it says afar in the Torah, but it means efer also. So, what's going to be the halacha by us? Would you say, afagav di'ikre afar, even though their efer could be considered under afar, okay, so we can use ashes. Hacha bekarka mishkan ktiv. Here it says, from the ground of the Mishkan. Now, you don't find ashes in the ground. You find soil in the ground. So because here it specifically says that when afar comes without anything else, we can say afar could mean efer. But here, afar comes together with karka mishkan, which sounds like it really means something coming from the ground, which would not include ashes. Oh, or perhaps you would say, Dilma hai b'karka mishkan, l'chad isa ben yudu, l'chad isa ben menachem udat. Maybe Karka Mishkan is coming for a totally different reason. Either Isi ben Yehuda said, right, to tell you Beit HaMikdash, or when the Mishkan moves somewhere else, or according to Isi ben Yehuda, it teaches you it has to be put onto the ground, but not that it has to come from the ground, in which case, maybe it would be okay. So, in other words, maybe Karka Mishkan doesn't come to teach you only things that come from the ground, in which case it could be ashes. So again, our question is only according to Beit Hillel, because he thinks that afar and efer are interchangeable when it comes to covering the blood of the slaughtered animal. Maybe he would say the same thing here, or maybe he would say Karka Mishkan comes teaching no, from the ground only. So our first attempt is going to be a very long attempt. The attempt is easy, but then we're going to have all possible rejections, and you'll see. Tashma. Let's learn from here. The Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rabbi Yishmael. Rabbi Yochanan quotes in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, Bishlosha mekomot halacha okevet mikah. There's three cases where the halacha overrides the Torah law. HaTorah amra be'afal, v'halacha b'chol davar. When it comes to covering the blood, that's the first case. Covering the blood of the slaughtered animal. So the Torah says afal, which sounds like soil, but the halacha is you can use anything. You can't exactly use anything, but anything that's similar, which would include ashes. Okay, so number one case is ashes can be used instead of, right, as afar. So here's a case where the halacha overrides the Torah because the Torah was very clear. It said afar. Afar is not efer. But the rabbi said, right, the halacha says you can. Second case. HaTorah amra. We're going to have a lot of review of some things we learned in Nazir for those who are continuing. Not your first Masechet. HaTorah amra ta'al. V'halacha b'chol davar. By a Nazir, it says, ta'al lo ya'avor rosho. You cannot put a razor over your head. Now, we know from a Nazir can't cut their hair at all, right? Whether you learned Masechet Nazir or you didn't. We know that a Nazir is not allowed to cut hair no matter what, not with, plucking out hairs, not with scissors, not anyway. So ta'ar clearly doesn't only mean ta'ar. Ta'ar would only mean razor. But the rabbis, again, the halacha came and said, oh, we're overriding the halacha. The halacha is they can't cut their hair with anything at all. Third halacha, get. When you get a get, says when a husband gives a get to his wife, it says minatam la sefer klitu. He gives her a book that separates between the two. HaTorah amra sefer v'halacha b'chol davar. It doesn't have to be written on something a sefer is written on, which in those days would mean parchment, even though we would generally write it on parchment. But you can actually write it, for example, I'll give you one example, we'll get to all this in Gittin, on an olive leaf. Okay, a leaf from an olive tree, you can write a get on it. Okay, I'm not recommending you would do that kind of thing, but if you wanted to, you could, it would be valid. So what do you see here? What's the relevance of these three? Well, Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Yishmael, there's three cases where the halacha overrides what it says in the Torah. Torah says one thing, the halacha says something else. Vim ita, and if our case were true, that instead of afar for the sotah to put in the waters, you could actually put ashes, well, lichshav namihai, it should have been on this list. Okay, you might be familiar with the structure where we say there's a list. The list doesn't include this, so therefore it must not be there. To which the rejection is always, what do you mean? Tana v'shiel. Maybe, okay, it's very nice they made a list, but often you make a list and you leave off some things, right? That's why people always say, I don't want to give you any compliments because then I won't be saying all of your praises. You'll think that's all I like about you. So, you always have to be wary when you say three things. Well, maybe there's more. So they say, maybe he just left off something. Now, the assumption is not that the Tana would forget something, but he was giving a partial list. Partial list means he gave us three out of, maybe there's 5, 6, 7, but he wouldn't give us 3 out of 4. If there were 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, so maybe he gave us 3 out of them. But you can only say Tana v'shir if you can find another case that's not on this list. So they're basically claiming right now, we tried to bring this as a proof that you can't use ashes, because if you could use ashes, it would have been on this list, which the Gemara says, maybe he just left it out. And really it belongs in the list. So they say, if you want to say he left it out, well, my shiur da shiur. What else was left out? Because you can't say there were 4 things and he left out 1. It just doesn't fly. So they're going to claim shiur mitzorah. Now I want to keep you, because it's a little bit, we're going to go to different places. I want to keep you focused. What we're basically trying to prove is, right, we started with saying it's not on the list because it doesn't belong on the list because you can't use ashes. So it's not a case where the Torah said afar and efer would be included as well. Then we say maybe he left it off the list, the Tana, Rabbi Yishmael, maybe he just left it out. And then we're going to say, well, in order to prove he left it out, which would then mean efer, if he left it out, efer could be used and it's just left off the list, but it could have been on the list. If we say that, you have to prove there's something else left off. We're going to basically suggest something else was left off, but then we're going to reject it and say, no. You can't say that was left off. Okay. And we'll see why that's not basically going to fit in. We're going to basically say this doesn't fit with the options that we have. Okay. It wouldn't be a case that it doesn't go. Once you say that, where are you left with? Then we're left with there's no other case that was left off. In which case, if this was left out, it was left out on purpose, which would then show you that you can't use efer. Okay. That it was left out because it's not an option where efer can be used. So let's go back and let's go back to the text. How do we know that Mitzorah was left off? What about a leper? We're going to see a few things about a leper today, both in this sugya and the next sugya. It's going to be a repeat of some things we've seen already. At least this part is. Ditanya. On the 7th day of the Mitzorah, the leper when he's healthy. Remember, then he gets better. So on the 7th day, yigalach et kol sa'aro. He shaves off all his hair. If you remember, there's 2 shavings. Okay, shaves off all his hair. That's a klal. Okay, we're going to have a klal upratu klal. It's one of the ways that Rabbi Yishmael darshans the Torah. You might remember in the Bright of Rabbi Yishmael with all the 13 ways, the v'yugim umidot, Torah and drasha, we say it in our tefillah. So it says one of them is a klal pratu klal. We have a general statement, a specific statement, and a general statement. And then we're going to say when you have that kind of structure, it's only things that are like the specific details. So let's read it inside. So the first thing it says on the 7th day, yigalach et kol sa'aro, the leper has to shave all his hair. Well, that's a generalization, obviously. All means everything. That's a generalization. Et rosho ve'et skano ve'et gabot einav prat. But then it says his hair, his beard, and his eyebrows. Now that's all details. Right? That's not all his hair. That's very specific things. Ve'et kol sa'aro yigalech chazar v'kalal. But then it goes back and says, and all his hair he should shave. You might remember we had all these drashot. What does rosho come to teach you? What does kano come to teach you? In any case, what you have here is klalu pratu klal. When you have a klalu pratu klal, where first they say everything, then they say specifics, then they say everything. Yetadan elakena prat. We only learn things that are like the details. Now, what's unique about hair on your face, on your beard, and on your eyebrows? Ma prat meforash makom kinu se'al v'nireh. Just like these are all places where there's a cluster of hair in one place, and it's seen by everybody. It's in a place where everybody sees on your face. The only hair the leper has to remove is things where it's similar. There's a lot of hair all in one place, and it can be seen. We already know this is not the halacha, right? Because we know that the leper has to take off all his hair. We learned that a lot in Nazir. So now they basically say, okay, so number one, we're going to be specific, the details. On the other hand, there's a klal. So my rabbi, what did they include? Rabbi se'ar raglayim. So what's yes included that might not, that they didn't list? Hair on your legs. Mine mi'et. What's excluded? Mi'et debeit hashech yudekule gufa. But they excluded hair on your armpits and hair on the rest of your body. So now they say, that's the meaning of the psukim. Now it's the meaning of the psukim after the drasha. But we're looking for a case. Remember, why did we bring this? We want to have a case where we see the halacha overrides the pasuk. So this is going to be the pasuk. Okay, now the pasuk is really not exactly this, but it's the drasha and the pasuk, which basically we're going to explain right now means the pasuk. And now the halacha is hilchata megalech kidalat. You shave like a gourd, okay, which basically means you shave your entire body till you're smooth like the peel of the gourd, the outside of a gourd. Ditnan, how do we know this? Because it says in a Mishnah. When the Kohen Gadol comes, the Kohen comes to shave the leper, ma'avir tar al kol b'saro. He puts a razor on his entire body. V'katani seifa, and it says in the seifa, b'yom hashvi'i megalchot tiglachat shniya k'tiglachat rishona. When it says on the 7th day they shave, they learn from there the shaving at the end is like the shaving in the beginning, meaning both shavings, all the hair, even though the meaning of the pasuk really from the klal pratu klal comes to indicate not all the hair. So what do you see here? This is another example of the halacha overrides the Torah, because again, the Torah says not all the hair, and the halacha is all the hair. So there you have it. This is left off. You could say in the same way. Also, the afar of the Sotah was left off. That really it could include ashes. To which the Gemara says 3 rejections. Okay, why this could not have been on the list. Once this could not have been on the list, then we only have one case that was left out. And as soon as there's one case that's left out, that was left out on purpose, which means that we can at least, we can't really learn from here that, right, or we could potentially learn from here. It's not on the list. That means that you can't use efer. Okay, at least it seems to indicate. We'll see in the end, the Gemara is not so clear about it. But okay, let's see. Why are we rejecting this? Why couldn't this have been on the list? I'm Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. First of all, he says very simply, this is not the same as all the other cases. Sorry, I read it wrong. Halacha kevet mikra, with the stress in the wrong place. I didn't read it wrong. I just didn't put the stress right. The halacha overrides a pasuk. In this case, o kevet midi Rabbanan, it overrides a drasha of the rabbis. The actual meaning of the pasuk did look like it was saying all the hair. So it's not the case the same as all the other cases. In the other cases, it said afar, and we're saying it means efer. That's overriding. That's different. But from what the actual pasuk said, here we're saying that this overrides a drasha on the psukim. That's a totally different story. Drashot are rabbinic. So it didn't belong in this list in the first place. So you can't say it was omitted on purpose, he left it out. Rav Papa Amal, second rejection of this, ki kachashiv halacha okevet ve'okeret. All the other cases where the halacha overrides it, the word la'akov is to bypass, but the word la'akor is to uproot. So in all of these other cases, it uproots it. Okay, it basically changes the meaning. When it says only a razor, it doesn't mean only a razor. It means other ways as well. When it says afar, it doesn't only mean afar. It means efer. That's something totally different. Changes the halacha. How kevetu mosefeti? This just adds. It says not only do you get rid of the hair in certain parts of the body, but you also add to it. You get rid of more hairs. But it's still saying that what the Torah says, you can't, you're right, you have to get rid of your hair in certain places. That's still true. It doesn't go against, it doesn't uproot anything. Third explanation why it doesn't belong on this list at all, Rabbi Yishmael, Hamat Nitamane, Rabbi Yishmael, Tidarish Klali Uprate. This is Rabbi Yishmael who holds Klal Uprat. But Hidlat Mane, you tried to reject it. You tried to say it's okevet, this case of Mitzorah, because it was because you see that you actually shave off all the hair. But you could say that the Mishnah about shaving off all the hair is Rabbi Akiva's opinion and not Rabbi Yishmael's opinion. Now, why is it a difference? You might remember that we saw that Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva darshan the Torah in different ways. So basically, if you remember, this list was written by Rabbi Yishmael. Now, according to Rabbi Yishmael, right, that's all Rabbi Yishmael. But don't question, in other words, what was the problem? Rabbi Yishmael is Darish Kalu Prate. Rabbi Yishmael really thinks that the Mitzorah doesn't shave off all his hair. And then it doesn't belong on this list because there is no halacha keret Torah. But we tried to say maybe it's a case of halacha keret because of the Mishnah that said they have to shave off all the hair, but maybe Rabbi Shimon doesn't agree with that. And maybe that's Rabbi Akiva's opinion. How do we know? And then Rabbi Akiva is going to darshan this in a different way. So at the top of Amud Bet now, it's Rabbi Kidlat Mane. Rabbi Akiva, he did darish ribuye umiute. Remember, there's two different ways of darshaning the Torah. One is klalim upratim, and one is miut v'ribuy. Now, the way it works is a little bit different. So now we're going to see. Ditan. So again, he's going to do the same general, specific general, but instead of calling it klal uprat, he's going to call it ribuy v'miut. Ribuy is including, miut is excluding, but we're going to end up klal uprat to klal becomes much more specific, where it's only going to include certain things and not all of the hair, whereas ribuy and miut is going to be much more general. It's going to include a lot more. It'll still exclude something, but much less. So now let's see. So we have again, general, all the hair. Then we have the hair on your head, your beard, and your eyebrows. Then we have all his hair. So we have, again, a ribuy, which includes a miut, excludes, right, is specific, and then it has a ribuy. So now, riba mi'et, riba hakol. So when it does a ribuy, and then a miut, and then a ribuy, it then includes, basically, it goes back to include everything, which basically is going to mean, yes, all your hair. In which case, again, we're going to end up saying, right, again, what does this mean? According to Rabbi Yishmael, there is no halacha keret mikah because the halacha is, according to Rabbi Yishmael, that it actually is limited. When we brought a question against him, trying to say, what do you see here? You see the halacha overrides because look, the halacha is against your drasha. No, the halacha just goes according to Rabbi Akiva. So how so? My riba de kule gufa. So what did it include? It included all the hair on the body. Umay mi'et. So what was excluded? It did get kind of specific there. What was it coming to exclude? Mi'et se'ar shebetoch hachotem. When you think about shaving a leper's hair, nobody actually thought that we were going to shave the hair inside your nostrils, right? So that's what it's coming to exclude according to Rabbi Akiva. In which case, again, that was the third rejection of saying, this is clearly not a case of halacha keret mikra. The halacha overrides a pasuk because the pasuk actually indicates all the hair, just not the hair in your nostrils. So we're left with basically, where are we left with? To which the Gemara says, my havela. So we rejected answer number one. And we didn't exactly reject it. It's actually interesting because what they really seem to say is theoretically you could learn from here, but since they kind of raised a question, it's not 100% clear. We tried to say that it's not listed in this list because really you can't use efer. If you could, it would have been in this list. And we suggested, well, maybe it left it off. Well, we'd have to find something else that was left off. We tried, we were unsuccessful. So it does seem to indicate you can't use efer, but the Gemara is still kind of wondering. So the Gemara asks, so my havela. My havela always means, so what's the deal? What's the halacha? Can you use efer? Can you not use efer? So they try to bring another source. To Amar Rav Huna bar Ashi Amara, ein sham afar mevi rak buvit yerek uyarak umekadesh. If you don't have afar, you can use the rakbuvit of a yerek. Okay, maybe someone can help me with an English translation of this word, but it's like the rotted part of a vegetable. It seems like something alternative, okay, some alternative, and you can use it. So now they want to say that since you can use this alternative, therefore it seems like, right, it's like, okay, decayed vegetable stuff you can use. So they seem to say, okay, since you can use this decomposed vegetable, sounds like you can use ashes as well. It's a little bit of a weak proof, to which the Gemara is going to say, very weak proof. Okay, I want you to notice, by the way, structure. The first answer we brought was to try to say you can't use efer. This answer is trying to say you can use efer. But now they say, here's a good translation, decomposed vegetable matter. Okay, thank you. Vilohi, but that's not the case. You can't prove from here that you can use ashes because obviously, you could say decomposed vegetables is more similar to soil than efer, lo havya afar, but ashes is really not similar. And again, we're struggling with, I told you, we're going to spend an entire amud on this and still be struggling with, wondering why they think even that efer could be afar, right? It's a little bit strange. Again, I think what they're building off is on the covering of the blood. Since there it could be, here it could be as well. But here seems to be really more talking about soil. And the sugya is not so clear in terms of a conclusion, but it does seem from both that we're really referring to something that has to do more with the ground and something where, something could grow from maybe. And it really wouldn't necessarily include efer. Okay, next section. The Mishnah on the previous daf had said that when you put the afar, so you take the soil from the ground, and then you add it to the water. And it says there, you have to use enough. It doesn't tell you exactly how much, but you have to use enough that it's noticed in the water. Meaning, right, you can put a little bit of soil in something in water and actually, you won't even see it. It'll dissolve in the water and it won't really be noticeable. So you have to put enough that you can see that it's clouded the water. So now we're going to bring a braita about this. Tanu Rabbanit, shlosha tzrichin sheyira'u. There's 3 mixtures in the Gemara that have to be noticeable, or not necessarily mixtures. It's an incorrect word. You'll see in a minute. The first 2 are mixtures, but the third is not. Afar Sotah. Okay, that's exactly our case. You put the soil in the water, that has to be noticeable. Efer para, the ashes of the red heifer, also similar thing. We're going to talk about the comparison soon. Put the ashes of the red heifer into the water. Virok yevama. Okay, this is the one that's not a combination. This is not a combination of 2 things, but when you spit, when the woman spits in her yabams in front of him, you have to see the saliva. Okay, that's a little harder to see, but it has to be enough saliva that you can see. Mishum Rabbi Yishmael amru af dam tzipor. In the name of Rabbi Yishmael, they said also the blood of a bird. Okay, what blood of what bird? You might remember, again, we're back to the leper. In the leper ceremony, first part of the ceremony before the next 7 days, but the first part, they take 2 birds, they slaughter 1 bird, they put the blood of the bird into the water. Today we're going to talk about that. And then they dunk the other live bird into that mixture of the blood and the water. And they dunk this eitz eres ezov and all this other stuff. I'm not going to get into all the details there. They dip them both in, and then they let the bird go free. So also the blood of the bird has to be noticeable in the water. There has to be enough blood. So Rabbi Yishmael added this to the list, but the rabbis didn't. So my Talmud Rabbi Yishmael, what's his reason? Dichtiv v'taval otam b'damat tzipor. So we're going to now darshan this pasuk in Vayikra Perek Yudalid 14, verse 6. So he dips these things, which is the bird, the live bird, and the tree, like the piece of the twig that he has, which is mixed with some other things. Tavalotam ve'et hatzipor chaya, right? That mixture of things and the live bird. Bidam hatzipor, in the blood of the bird, hashchuta, the one that was slaughtered. Al hamayim achayim, says in the blood, on the water. Okay, meaning kind of in the blood and the water, but that we're going to see it's a little bit of a strange wording, and that's what's going to lead to two different drasha. So Rabbi Yishmael basically says you have to see the blood, and the rabbis say you don't. How did they get it? We're going to have a big ping pong back and forth between them of how they each learn the psukim. Vitanya, bidam yachol bidam v'lo b'mayim. Maybe it's only dipped in the blood and not the water. Tamalomar b'mayim. That's why it says in the water. It doesn't actually say b'mayim in the pasuk. It says al hamayim achayim. Okay, but it's written here in the text b'mayim, but really it means hamayim. Imayim yachol b'mayim v'lo b'dam. So now it says if you just have water, you might have thought water without blood. Tamalomar b'dam. That's why it says b'dam. So it's very confusing. It goes in the water or it goes in the blood. We don't get it. Haketzad. How does it work? Mevi mayim shadam tzipor nikarbe. Comes Rabbi Yishmael and Darshan. The fact that the pasuk says also blood and water, and we'll see in a minute, and not just into them, which would have been clear you meant the blood and the water. From there, you learn that the blood has to be noticeable in the water. Okay, that's what the word blood comes to teach you. The comment, how much would that be? Revi'it. Okay, you need a revi'it of blood to be noticeable in the water, a quarter loaf. The Rabbanan, so what do they do with that pasuk? Because they don't think it needs to be noticed. So how do they learn? Why does it say dam and mayim? He says, very obviously, it comes just to teach you, it's just to teach you the basic law that they have to be mixed. You wouldn't have known otherwise they have to be mixed. So Rabbi Yishmael is going to say why, right? He thinks otherwise it tells you it needs to be mixed. And therefore, this is coming to teach you it has to be noticeable. So Rabbi Yishmael in Ken lichtov rachmana v'taval b'hem. If it wanted to tell you that you have to dip in both, it should have just said dip in them, and it would have been obvious. You mean both the water and the blood. B'dam u'b'mayim lamali. So you still don't need to isolate and say blood and water. So therefore, what's it coming? Linikar. It's to teach you it has to be noticeable. The blood has to be enough blood that you can see it. The Rabbanan, who don't think so, says, why couldn't you have said, and he dips it into them? You might have thought, dip it in the blood and then dip it in the water. You wouldn't have necessarily known that they're supposed to be combined. Therefore, the reason it says blood and water, because again, what does it say? The blood, that's in the water, basically. So that's to teach you they have to be combined. Rabbi Yishmael, la'arvan, krach reinaktiv. Rabbi Yishmael says, what, you're ignoring the previous pasuk. The previous pasuk already told us that they had to be combined. How so? It says, v'shachata tatzipor achat. They don't tell you the important part, but it says, v'shachata tatzipor achat el kli cheres al mayim chayim. You slaughter, right before this pasuk, it told you slaughter the bird into the water. So it's obvious you slaughter it into the water. What else? How else could you understand that pasuk? So again, just to review, Rabbi Shimon says, it already says in the previous pasuk, you slaughter the blood, you slaughter the animal and the blood goes into the water. Then this pasuk, because it says blood and water, it could have just said into them. You already know they're combined, so you know you're going into them. Therefore, it said blood and water to show you the blood has to be noticeable. The rabbis say no. Couldn't have learned from that pasuk that they need to be combined. You needed the blood and the water in the second pasuk to teach you they need to be combined. Now, why not? Wasn't that obvious? The pasuk we just read a second ago obvious? So the rabbis say no. Again, they're going to have a very unique reading of this pasuk. The rabbis say you can't learn it from that previous pasuk. Why not? You might have thought from the previous pasuk that you would slaughter the animal next to, maybe it just means next to the kli, but hold the veins shut. Don't let the blood drip into the water. Just do it right next to the water. And then open it up, right, and let it go into a different vessel. Why you would think that is hard to understand, but so think the rabbis, and that's why they say that next pasuk is needed to teach you they need to be combined. And that's why when it says you dip in the blood and the water, to make sure we know, dip it in the blood and the water together. Okay, that's how each one reads it. And that's why that pasuk is not free to teach the halacha of Rabbi Yishmael, that it has to be noticeable. Okay, next, we're going to go to Rabbi Yirmiyah. You might remember him. He asks a lot of nitpicky questions. And today he's really going to get attacked for it. Okay, by Rabbi Yirmiyah, Rabbi Zera. He asked Rabbi Zera the following question: what if the animal is so big that the bird is so big that when you slaughter it, so much blood goes in, it just looks like blood and not water? And what if it's so small that you can't even notice anything? The amount of blood that came out was so teeny that it's more water than blood and you can't even see it at all. Because the rabbis say it doesn't need to be noticed. So he wants to go to the extremes. And what if it's so not noticed that there's water or so not noticed that there's blood? To which Amarle, Rabbi Zera, like a typical teacher, reprimands him and says, haven't I told you many times, don't question the shiurim of the rabbis? Like, stop asking me these very annoying questions. The Torah was talking about a regular type of tzipor drawer, like I don't remember the exact translation, but a type of bird. Right? Drawer means freedom, but shiru Rabbanan. The type of bird that they were talking about in the Torah was a normal average sized bird. It wasn't a huge bird and it wasn't a teeny bird. So therefore it's obvious the Torah meant in a case where there'll be some sort of combination here. Thank you, Patty, for saying it's a sparrow. Okay, so a sparrow doesn't come in very large sizes or very teeny sizes. So don't ask me questions like this. Last part for today. Now we're going to move on to we've been talking all day about this soil that you put into the water. When you put it into the water, does it have to go soil into water, or can it be water into soil? Can you put the soil first in the vessel and then pour the water on top? So we're going to have a machloket between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis, Tanu Rabbanan. Higdim afar l'mayim pasul. If you first did the afar, the soil, then the water, it's disqualified. No way, no how. Rabbi Shimon machshir. Rabbi Shimon says you could. So my time with Rabbi Shimon, why does he think it's okay? Because if you remember, what does it say? Vinatan, right? We saw you put the mayim. Sorry, let me just find the pasuk. V'lakacha kohen mayim kedoshim b'kli cheres. He takes the water in the vessel. Umin ha'afar asher yeh b'karka mishkan yikacha kohen v'natan al mayim. It seems pretty clear. You put it in the water. So how does Rabbi Shimon say it could go the reverse? Well, he says the following. My time, dichtiv, and he's going to prove it. I told you we get back to this, the comparison to the ashes of the para aduma. So they take from the afar. Now, something weird about this pasuk. It says you take from the afar of the burning of the chatat. Okay, meaning you take the burnt para aduma, and you take from the afar. Now it should be efer. It's the ashes. It's not the soil. So you see another place where the Torah, right, kind of interchanges. Vitanya, Amar Rabbi Shimon. The Braita says, the Rabbi Shimon says, "V'chi afar hu halo efer hu." What are you talking about? It's not afar. It's efer. It's ashes. They changed the word in order to make gzeira shava, right? To say, we're going to learn from the afar there, the efer there, to the afar by us. Ne'amar kan afar v'ne'amar la'alan afar, just because it says there and it says it here. Ma lahalan afar al gabei mayim af kan afar al gabei mayim. Just like by us in the Sotah, it says the afar and into the water, because there it was very clear. We're going to learn also for the para aduma, it's supposed to be ashes into water. But just like the para aduma, if you reverse the order, it would be good as well. Also, if you did it by the Sotah and you switch the order, it will work. Now, what we're missing here is how do we know it works the other way in the para aduma? Where do we get that from? Trey Kraik Tiv. There's two psukim. Tiv alav. Okay, so now the pasuk says, so they take from the ashes, even though it says afar, which means soil. Vinatan alav mayim chayim al keli. Then it says they put on it water to the kli. It's a very confusing pasuk. So it sounds like alma afar efer bereisha. It sounds like natan alav, meaning you put it on the ashes. It sounds like the ashes go first. But it also says mayim chayim al keli, alma mayim beresha. But it says mayim, fresh water in the kli, which sounds like the water's in the vessel without anything else. So haketzad, how does that work? Ratzah zenoten, ratzah zenoten. So from there, Rabbi Shimon learns, since it seems to indicate both at once, it seems to be that either which order would work. Even though, again, ideally, we learned it out from the Sotah. Put it into the water. But if you did it the other way, it works because of this natan alav. The Rabbanan, what did they say? El kli dafka, alav la'arvan. The el kli is the dafka. Learn it that way. El kli means it has to be the water in the kli first. What does he do with the natan alav? Alav means la'arvan. They have to be mixed up. Ve'ema alav dafka el kli shtech yutam b'kli. Why don't they say the reverse? Why do the rabbis assume that the alav is the one that just means, oh, they just need to be mixed? Why doesn't he say alav means put the ashes right first and put the water on top? And el kli would just mean they just need to be in the vessel even with the ashes. Well, mamatzinu b'kol makom machshir lamala av kamachshir lamala. Gives a logical explanation. It says in general, what's the important part? The important thing always goes into, right? Usually you have the water, the base, and then you add what's the critical part. What's the critical part? In the Sotah, it's the afar. In the paraduma, it's the efer. So the rabbis learn, they say, no, it's clear that the thing that makes, what turns the paraduma waters into paraduma waters, it's the ashes. So that obviously has to go first. Okay, so from there we see the machloka between them and where they get it from the psukim. So quick review of today. We started with these drasha b'karka mishkan. We saw 3 different interpretations of it and 2 main interpretations of whether the soil can come from outside or whether the soil has to come from within. Ideally, anyway, we saw a lot of ideals today, but if you don't do it that way, maybe it's okay anyway. We asked a big question whether afar could include efer. If you don't have afar, can you use ashes? We had a big back and forth about it. It seems like the Gemara seemed to conclude really you can't. Then we had the water, the afar has to be seen in the water. And then from there, we got to the blood of the mitzorah. And there was this machloket about the blood of mitzorah. And we had whether it needs to be seen or not. We had a back and forth about how they each start in the psukim. And then we ended with this order. Is the order critical? Everyone agrees it's supposed to be the afar into the water. And likewise in the paraduma, the efer into the water. But what if you did it in the reverse? Would it be okay? And right, can we learn it from their gzera shava or not? Or maybe you can't, or maybe there it's not, right? Maybe even there it's not okay to do it in the reverse order because, again, the machshir, what makes the water, makes it have significance is the important part. That has to go into the water. The water is kind of the base, and then you add into it what's important. I was trying to think about making a cup of tea or coffee, right? Usually you actually put the coffee or the tea in first. Here it's the reverse, right? If you want to put the main thing in, you're going to put it in after. So anyway, some food for thought. And with that, we'll finish for today. Have a great Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Nice to be back on Zoom.